to you about. I hope that I have a little bit of time because I do have some specific things that I just wanted to encourage you with. And for people that don't know me, I've been involved in public life for 25 years. And as I just shared a little bit about the details of my life, it is not a secret that I was in welfare, but as a young woman, I got caught up in those lies. And it was after a Christian conversion that I just totally changed my life. People don't think it worked. I just changed my life. I went back to school. I got a degree in business. I went into business. After the '92 riots destroyed my business, I started focusing on social reform and social activism in 1992. And then I began to work on welfare reform. That's how I know so many people all over the country, and in particular in D.C., and those that are on our team, because I worked with the Congress and the RNC during all the early 90s to get welfare reform passed. And then I founded my current organization, CURE. And as was said in my bio, we look at market-based solutions to fight poverty. We believe that there is something inherently wrong with the people that would trap certain people into pathologies that they know are counterproductive and destructive. And what we saw, especially in welfare policy, is that they created generations of this type of dependency on social government and government programs. So I concluded, like most Americans, that we needed people in Washington that believe in traditional values, because choice loses its meaning if it doesn't matter what you choose. And we're beginning to see that, in particular with the Gosnell situation. I knew, like many, we need people in Washington that believe in limited government. When you think about the role of government, it's to protect our interests and our pursuits, not to plunder them, not to exploit us. We need people that believe in free markets. Profit is good. Profit is the engine for tomorrow. It's moral in that because without profit, it is without profit that we are not able to invest in tomorrow and in creating the jobs that we need. And then we need people that understand a strong national allegiance and defense. And as we're working through this immigration debate in Washington that has left the front page, but it's still very aggressive in Washington, D.C., we have to talk about American exceptionalism and mainstreaming and a pluribus unum, many becoming one. And I think that I'm so adamant because my love story embodies American exceptionalism. That anyone from any background, any ethnicity, anyone that just even needs to be born again and start over can do that. And there's nowhere in the world they can do that except here in America. So for someone that says that is not exceptionalism, that there's nothing exceptional or special about that, they need to start revisiting the heroes that made this great country what it is. But unfortunately, it took a collapse, economic collapse, to get Main Street to start looking at the state of affairs in our country. And I think that that's one of the reasons that you could pretty much be discouraged coming out of an election cycle like last time, and many across the country. Some of our states are solidly red, and as I was encouraging people earlier, when we look out, we lost on a national scale, but our ideals did not lose. We have 30 governors and we have 24 states that are promoting the values that we stand for and doing a very aggressive job. And what's really unique and interesting about it is the people that are getting this information and their lives are being able to be touched by the things that their current Republican leadership is doing are those that need those ideas the most. The very ones that vote against them, the very ones that have bought into this idea of the welfare state. It's unappreciated. We start getting caught in the political of it and with the voter of it, and we forget that the people that are living in those 4,000 housing projects that we set up across this country are not pleased with this type of environment. They're the ones that when they come out to my speeches, they are so thankful, they are so adamant, they give me standing ovation, then they want to take a picture and they tell me, we're going to hang this right next to Snoop Dogg and Barack Obama, and I have it on my wall. I'm like, okay. No, they understand that this stuff has destroyed their lives. They're looking for a way out. So we have to separate them out, the ones that need our ideas, from the ones that stand in the way because they bought the ideas of big government. I was really thankful when the Tea Party showed up. And I don't know how people in this room feel about the Tea Party, but when they began to focus on socialism and say it out loud, I was thankful because in Uncle Sam's Plantation, the book that's here, I had already talked about American socialism. I explained it. 10 years ago I wrote that book. The book that you have, I revised it, updated because it's current today. It's like my vice president keeps telling me, Star, you got to slow down. You're breaking the Nesbitt rule. Those of you that are in business might know John Nesbitt. He's a thinker for the business world, and often one of their keynote lecturers. And he tells them, do not get so far ahead of the parade, no one knows you're in it. And he's like talking to the innovators, but you can do that in ideas too, I suppose. But I talked about these ideas of socialism in that book. And I talked about how I got out. And I said in that book that it's a reality in every inner city in this country already. I said that there were two Americas way before John Edwards discovered that there might be two Americas and the possibility for two wives, but I didn't get it all that far, even though I do retell my story in this book. But he was pointing at something that is absolutely true. The socialism in our urban communities has been a long time, and the rest of the country on capitalism. I said in the book that, the reality is that the government and the government social engineers had created all of these social programs, some starting in the 30s, but they put them on steroid in the 60s, often with the lie that they were going to help lift people out of poverty. And by 60, a benevolent Uncle Sam was welcoming mostly poor blacks onto this government plantation by expanding out these 30s programs and then also building out a welfare state. And the reason that blacks got hit first is because they were very vulnerable. The African American community in this country went from slavery to Jim Crow, and from Jim Crow to a welfare state. So what they have become for us conservatives is a class study. We have now a picture into what happens when people buy the ideas of big government and socialism. Instead of helping blacks solve the economic problems that were created because of their history of slavery and Jim Crow, we created monstrous moral problems in this community. The kind of problems that are inevitable when you turn your life over to others. The rules of welfare, the means test that we had to change, that we changed. See, we forget who we are because, you have a few losses and you think that everything needs to be fresh and new. No, the ideas that we brought forth during welfare reform are still for all of the country today, obviously, and not just for the poor, because the rules, the means test that we had to change over welfare, broken down simply were don't work, don't save, and don't get married, and we'll just keep you enslaved to a poverty plantation. And that's one of the reasons that we started seeing the community, the black community, who during the 60s said remove governmental barriers. That's what the civil rights movement was about. Jim Crow was government. And they said, remove these barriers so we can live free, so that we can reach our educational aspirations, so that we can get into economic prosperity. And instead, they were targeted by a very vicious sort in our society who are now empowered in Washington, D.C., who saw them as an example to do their social engineering and just totally collapse their potential in this country. I mean, I am so adamantly opposed to redistribution of wealth and that I'm going to spend the rest of my life in Washington fighting it. Well, not all of it, because once my grandson gets older, I'm going to spend more time with him. And especially little Miss Naomi now. She's only 1 year old. She's so cute. When her birthday came, I gave her a Neiman Marcus card. I sent it to her parents. I would take a bill to the parents, but help her kind of spend it. I mean, come on now. This notion of redistribution of wealth, it's inconsistent. It will never work because it's inconsistent with the founding of this country. We're a nation founded in freedom and personal responsibility. But it's also a violation of Scripture. And that's why it won't work. It can't work. The Bible says don't covet. The 10 Commandments says do not covet. And socialism is rooted in covetousness. Somebody has something somebody else doesn't have, so we go hire politicians to take it from them. Now we're violating the 8th commandment because it said don't steal. And for those of you that think it's theft, you're not getting letters from the IRS that say benevolently give. In fact, I don't know what kind of letters we get from the IRS lately. In fact, my pastor already called me and prayed for me that, it's right before the Gosnell press conference, he said, because I have a feeling you might be opening your door for an audit. And then a couple of days later, we hear all this IRS scandal. I'm like, okay, what were those prayers again? No, years ago, I found my way through an audit. I just don't keep any receipts at all. When they walk in, I'm just going to say, well, no, you're right, I'm keeping a record. Now, that doesn't mean I'm out of control. I have a wonderful CPA. We touch dot every I and cross every single T. But they're not going to be able to come in and say, okay, pull all the records. No, we didn't keep all that. The legacy of American socialism is our blighted inner cities, our dysfunctional government schools, and our broken black families. And I did find my way out through the grace of God. And after welfare reform, I actually thought we were on a road moving ourselves and our society, our poor communities, out of socialism and replacing what was in their communities with wealth-producing capitalism. So I began to work on promoting school choice. I'm so thankful that your state is on the cutting edge of school choice. And you'll get through the courts because remember what just happened in Indiana. Every time we pass any kind of school choice opportunities, they go straight into court. Liberals just seem to be endless in their money because they just keep going into courts. but losing. In Indiana, they just lost at the Supreme Court level on their school choice voucher program that includes everything except the homeschoolers. I don't think they have that in there, which is remarkable for you to be able to do. Although I have mixed feelings about whether it's a good idea for the homeschoolers to do if they want to stay free. But that's a whole nother speech. But I began to work on promoting these ideas because the only way that we're going to turn around what has happened in all of our hard-hit communities after 50 years of liberal social engineering is to get their youth, is to go back in here and get their youth into schools where men wear collars and have sticks and Bibles in their hand because they've lost their moral framework. You know, people always ask me, how did you get so lost? It's easy to get lost when you don't know the rules to how to live. You know, we as a society decided we didn't need rules on how to live. And what's amazing and fascinating is in every other discipline, we understand that there are rules to govern that discipline. You know, a lot of folks are coming in from graduation. Someone just told me they just barely made it because their niece graduated and we're having graduations from college. Those kids just spent 4 years in college learning the rules that govern disciplines, whether those disciplines are music or science, whether they're math or English. There are rules that govern every discipline, and yet when it comes to life, we decided as a society we don't need it anymore, and people are just frankly lost. They do not know what to do. And when people don't know what to do, they look outside and see what everybody else is doing. And when they look outside and see what everybody else is doing in this society, they see pop culture and government. And so we need to get our kids, and we need to get them young, and we need to get, the more urban and broken they are, the more they need vouchers and school choice. And so I began to work on that. I began to work on personal retirement accounts as an alternative to the government retirement programs that are forced through their Social Security. But by 2001, we began going in the opposite direction. Power changed political parties, but control stayed in Washington. And by 2008, power changed political parties again. And incredibly, by 2009, instead of poor America on socialism becoming more like rich America on capitalism, rich America on capitalism began to look like poor America on socialism. I mean, I've always been for the underdog, but doctors, Wall Street bankers, I mean, my goodness, Washington, D.C. overnight changed into lobby field day so that people could protect their interests. Because all of a sudden we started seeing this government just totally recklessly out of control, spending other people's money in the name of stimulus. And rich America very quickly started looking like poor America on socialism. What our discussions were attempting to be by the time we realized all of this was going on as a larger community. I know some of you have invested quite a bit of your time in the political, but as a society, especially as the Tea Party woke up, those that, I say, like fish who didn't realize that there was water until they started seeing the sand and started seeing their freedom slip away and began to get engaged again and began to get active in their local communities, and now finding out that their own government has targeted them through this IRS scandal that's unfolding. But what the discussion began to be again, and needed to be for an awful long time, is that at root of America's economic problems today is government dependency. Government dependency gripped America's poor and minority communities some 50 years ago and locked 3 generations in economic stagnation. And today, government dependency is choking our entire society. Today, 70% of all non-defense tax intake is a transfer to an individual. 70% of all non-defense tax intake is a transfer to another individual. It is true that today, 47% of Americans are in some way government dependent. Now, they got us on the back and pushing back and on the fence when that was brought up in a private conversation with some donors and Mitt Romney was running. But it is absolutely true. They began to then throw out that most of these that were the government dependent were senior citizens and or vets. And we didn't have a defense because we don't think about it deeply. Well, I'll tell you something. There is an answer to that. There's a question that should be asked. Do we really want someone who's worked all their lives and done all of the right things and broke none of the rules to end up in their senior years with their hand out to a federal government who looks at all life, one size fits all, and builds out welfare programs that are nameless? You know, when you think about come on ladies, we're all shoppers in here. One size fits all, we know it doesn't fit anyone. I mean, you can now go from 0 to wherever, down and make sure that even if you're a full figure, you look good. One size fits all doesn't work, it doesn't fit. And with vets, after someone spends their own time, talent, and resources to put their lives at risk to go and defend our interest of freedom, which half the country now is even confused with what that means. For them to come back and then have to live near a base or government dependent, we should be ashamed of ourselves. We should have taken them on, because there is no excuse in a free land like ours that 47% are government dependent, and included in that number are our seniors and our veterans.
GrokTV.